As you can see, we are in the middle of London. You can see the financial buildings in the background there. It's Tuesday afternoon. I'm with the British National Party's London Assembly member Richard Barnbrook. We're going to talk about finance, aren't we, Richard, today?
Yes, headlines today in the free paper in London, the Metro. Quite simple design, the crashing of the red line. How low can we go? This is a serious question. How low can the finances of Britain really go? And who is it really going to affect? There's one particular story inside this front page, the grilling of the gorilla of greed, Richard who was the chairman of the now defunct Lehman's. 170 plus million pounds payoff. This is disgusting. You know, this is an absolute travesty. Again, it only begs belief. How can this Labour government privatise profit and nationalise debt? And this has got to stop. And when you actually look at these figures going down, millions, billions of pounds being wiped off the Financial Times index for Britain. This is global. You have Russia freezing its stock. You have Iceland freezing its stocks. You have banks collapsing. There's hundreds of thousands of jobs going to go. And who are going to be affected? Those most vulnerable. And when you look at the context of this free fall of the finances in Britain and across the world, it is pensions under threat, it is jobs under threat, it is actually your savings under threat, it is the food prices going through the roof, and more important than anything maybe, the one that's going to affect the most vulnerable of all, the elderly and the most fragile. Domestic fuel prices going right up. And what is the Bank of England doing? Very little at the moment as it's gone independent. What is Brown and Darling doing? They keep wobbling on this way and that way. We've got to do something, we've got to do something. But again, out of fear, they're doing nothing. Something has to take place right now. We can't wait another month before the markets crash even further.
Yeah, we've seen that today, just half an hour ago, something like that. It's flashed up on the screens that IceSave, a online subsidiary of an Icelandic bank with 300,000 British customers, has gone into liquidation. And the government have said, of course, that you'll get your money back. But, of course, we know that even if we do get our money back, or those savers that could be affected, it's going to take a long time. What do you think is going to be the problem if, like the NatWest, the building which we can see in the background, if that goes and people lose their money, I mean, how badly is that going to affect them when it's going to take months for them to get the money out? It's going to be a disaster, isn't it?
Well, what they've got to do, they've got to follow the line of Ireland. 100% payback from the deposited finance you have. Not the £50,000. OK, those below the bracket of income, very poor people I'm referring to here, probably don't have £50,000 in savings. But young families trying to start up, young business people trying to start up, may have those sort of savings and a bit more in their accounts. Do what Ireland's done. Promise that every penny will be paid back. The Bank of Scotland, the Royal Bank of Scotland, belonging to the NatWest, have made comments to Darling and Brown today. You have to guarantee 100% payback of the billions you have in your own finances. Not their own finances, our taxpayer finances, as you pay back to everybody. And also, he was suggesting, bring down the interest rate. Housing, that 10% of the value of property of housing in this year has been wiped off. That marries up to £30,000 to £40,000 is taken off your value of your property. The banks, or not the banks, or the banks and also government have to act now and guarantee that every deposit by the public is secure.
Yeah, I think the thing, as you mentioned before, the most vulnerable people in London, of course, the pensioners are amongst those people, and this wave of poverty that's now going to engulf us, because we basically bailed out these bankers, haven't we? The thing is that when we want to borrow their money, we get charged massive amounts of interest, and now we're having to give our money back. When we're going to need the money, they'll be charging us interest on our own money, won't they? And yet we're in a country where we're going to allow thousands of pensioners, because of this, to freeze to death this winter, aren't we?
Yes, well, there has to be a stealth tax laid upon the municipal companies, the gas, electricity, and also water in many respects. They have got to be taxed on the profit that they're making to give it back to those most in need. Now, this can be done in two ways, either by reducing their bills from the companies themselves, looking at the vulnerable with aid from government, or simply paying through the stealth tax to government X amount of % to actually pay back into domestic bills of the elderly and disabled.
Changing the subject entirely, we've got a situation going on in London, in Barking and Dagenham, where Labour are, instead of concentrating their resources on fighting knife crime and actually admitting that there is a problem, they are using up council resources to attacking you. They're obviously very fearful of you. I mean, John Cruddas has said in the paper today that we are in with a serious chance, the BNP are in with a serious chance of winning a seat in the European elections. That's straight from John Cruddas's mouth. Johnny Three Houses Cruddas, of course. I mean, there are reports in the papers of knife crime all of the time. I mean, how does it feel for you to be in the opposition there? How frustrating it is for you to be continually asking about Labour to admit to the epidemic level of knife crime, and all they're doing is they're trying to undermine your position because you're in the BNP?
Yes, there was a couple of stories that came through. Okay, the passion, the serious passion of this type of crime against our youth and the general public of London and the UK as a whole is quite horrendous. And maybe I made a slip up saying, well, 2 people died, 2 youths died. What it should have been is the fact that 2 youths were close to dying after knife attacks. And there was a girl from Barking Dagenham murdered inside a school. And the fact is that when we started this campaign, London's Mothers Against Knives, as it's known now, last November, December, and got it in full swing, January, February this year, Labour could only jump behind us when we was questioning the Prime Minister about mandatory sentences for those people found with knives in the streets. All they did then was say, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that, human rights here, human rights that. How about the human rights of those who died under knife attacks? So all Labour is simply doing is trying to find some way of undermining us to cover up the fear that they know we are dealing with these issues on a daily basis to assist all Londoners, while Labour simply sitting back discussing what they can and cannot do rather than getting on with the job. Schools should have random checks with knife gates or metal detector gates. The fact is that they are simply inept. They're unable to do anything of their own free will. It's not until we get things in motion and start getting success. Their measly 800 signatures in Barking Dagenham compared to our almost 20,000 signatures from the borough shows that people are turning to us to get these problems resolved. And it makes it quite clear here.
Yeah, this is a story, isn't it? I mean,
this is a story of the local paper.
Yeah.
It took place on 1st of October. It got to the press the 2nd of October. Boy stabbed at anti-knife event.
At anti-knife event.
Is that an irony or what? A 16-year-old boy supporting the knife crime, who was set up by, isn't important. It was set up to prevent or try to inform people about the danger of carrying knives and the effect it has on families when young people are murdered. And this young child had a dispute with somebody else, outside or inside that demonstration. And now the person turned round and knifed him, and I think he just survived. He was in intensive care for, I'm not quite sure how long, it doesn't actually mention this article, but I will find out very recently.
And where was this, Richard? This was actually in Barking and Dagenham, yeah?
This is in Barking, Borough of Barking Dagenham, outside the Barking Theatre on Broadway, which is a street right next door to Barking and Dagenham's Town Hall.
And this was recently?
Right next door to the police station. This was recently. This was
1st of October.
1st of October.
Yeah. Now, you see, Labour are oblivious to this. They don't want to look at issues like that. And I think the main point for one of your meetings coming up, they object to the fact that you described a murder in Barking and Dagenham when the woman was from Barking. She was actually murdered in Newham, yes, right, 2 miles down the road. But the most important fact for Labour isn't that fact that she was murdered, it's the fact that you slightly got the geography wrong by 2 miles. And in fact, this woman was from Barking and Dagenham and was one of your constituents, wasn't she?
Yes. And again, in the borough, we have hundreds of knife attacks. And I'm sure all the records show that 3 murders have taken place in this last year. And they're trying to say there's been no murders at all. And the fact is, again, this is a Labour problem. They've been in government for 10 years. If they wanted to rectify this problem, they could have put more police and more stringent measures on the streets to prevent young people getting hold of knives and using them. And this is simply their inept approach to the youth. Give them something to do. Re-educate them towards having a healthier life, more competitive sports, even get involved with boxing. Do something to let that testosterone out them rather than taking off the streets and murdering young people. There was also an article. This is an irony of our time. When you find a supermarket selling a jacket with a chain and an inside sewn pocket, zip pocket, sorry, that has a penknife of inches on the market being sold as some sort of fashionable gimmick. This is pathetic. And the irony is, the girl working for TK Maxx, who was somebody who actually sold these jackets, was actually murdered by the same product that she sold. The government should be stepping into this, and also Boris Johnson, and saying enough is enough. Forget blunt 1, 2 and repeat blunt 3. Get police on the streets and have a proactive campaign. Stop people randomly and check them. If they look suspicious or have a past record of knives, pull them in. No more softly, softly. Our kids are dying and families are being destroyed by this inept approach by Labour government.